you can do as much SEO as you want, but if your website isn't strong enough, then it's not going to work in the end.
You've got to consider now that users have such different expectations. Like they do just expect fast, intuitive, engaging online experiences. We have such a short attention spans that we have to be merging that SEO and that UX.
Spend a lot more time understanding users and personas and user experience and that kind of whole customer journey, and focus less on the tactics. You need to have such a good understanding of your audience in order to get everything else right.
Think about how to declutter. Don't give people too many options. Don't give them too many pages. Don't make them think.
In today's episode, we're joined by Lauren Irwin and Lucy Williams. Lucy has 2 decades of experience in digital design working with big brands and startups. She is very fortunate to have worked with brands like KFC, LG, Hasbro, and Molson Coors. One of her proudest achievements was creating an award-winning mobile commerce experience for Pizza Hut Delivery UK. Lauren, with a decade of experience in digital marketing, has a knack for problem solving and working on complex SEO strategies. She has thrived in both in-house and agency roles with companies like Earth's Best and Ella's Kitchen being 2 of her favorite. Lucy and Lauren met in 2015 at a previous web agency. They now work together at Abstract, a web design and development agency in Nottingham, UK. Since reuniting at Abstract last year, Lucy and Lauren have worked together to combine their knowledge of SEO and UX, creating a seamless and successful XSO process that delivers big client results. They are focused on creating digital experiences that perform in search engines, support user-friendly journeys, and ultimately lead to higher conversion. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Digital Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Eli Adams. Today's episode is brought to you by FireUsMarketing.com, where SEO solutions pave the way to digital excellence. Welcome to the show, Lucy and Lauren.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, very excited to have you guys both. So this should be really fun. So we have an SEO expert, we have a UX expert, and the point of this call is to talk through how UX and SEO combined help each other out, right? So part of this SEO series where we have, at first it started out with 10, then it grew to 20. Now we have a 30-part SEO series talking about all areas of SEO. And I think this is going to be a really fun one to dive into and learn, because you guys have lots of experience, and it's cool that you both work together, even though you're in separate rooms right now. You work together at the same company. You have for quite a few years, and I'm really interested to learn this XSO thing, right? Did I say it right? SXO. That's right. SXO. Which is kind of a new word for me. I Googled it this morning. I guess it's been around for a little while. But yeah, either way, I'm excited. So before we dive into the tactical side of things, let's jump in and talk about who you guys are. Where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be when you were little? And how did you go from there to getting into the digital world? So let's start with Lauren. Let's go ahead and learn where Lauren came from.
Okay, so I'm from Nottingham in the UK, Robin Hood country.
Nice.
And when I was little, I wanted to be an ice cream man in one of the ice cream trucks.
No way.
That was my core goal as a child.
That's awesome.
But then as I grew up, I got really into film, and I actually studied film and media production at university. And then I just got flung into the real world and had to get a real job. And I ended up selling handbags to start with.
Okay.
And then I moved to a business where I became a buyer of film and media product. And then there was a role open for marketing. I didn't know anything about marketing. It was quite a high position. And I interviewed for that, and they let me have it in the same business. So that's where my journey started, very much in at the deep end. Had to learn very quickly about marketing, digital marketing, absolutely everything. And then I suppose as time went on, I got really interested in SEO and content writing, and that's where I progressed on from there.
Was there anything in your childhood that sort of prepared you for your future skills? Like, you wanted to be an ice cream person. Like, did you practice selling at that point? Like, was there anything that you saw that allowed you to be successful in your role today?
I think I was always, I really loved to write when I was little. So I was always a very wordy person, very good with language. So when I got into copywriting, that really enabled me to write kind of your people first content. And that's really kind of supercharged my SEO as well, because I have that detailed thinking with the kind of creative thinking as copywriting. But yeah, nothing to do with ice cream making whatsoever. I just liked ice cream.
That's awesome. I would like to see your future turn into marketing for some ice cream company.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
Lucy, what about you?
So I grew up in Leicestershire, which is only about an hour south of Nottingham. I wanted to be, I love Matilda. I wanted to be Miss Honey when I grew up. I wanted to be that wonderful, wholesome primary school teacher.
Yeah.
But interestingly, my sister is now that primary school teacher, but I took a different turn. I did a degree in multimedia design. And it was one of those degrees where at the end you came out of it and you were like, I know a little bit about a lot, but I don't know a lot about anything. Like, so which direction do I want to take? So yeah, I just chose web design, and I got my foot in the door at an agency in Nottingham. And I started out doing web design, but also web development. So I would do all the front end development, CSS, HTML, as well as the designing. So it was kind of both sides of the brain. And then I got really into like user experience when that came about in however, like 15 odd years ago when I really got into that. And I thought, oh, that's like 3 jobs, design, UX, development. I'm going to have to ditch one of these. So I sort of retired from the development because I hate all the bug fixing. So yeah, design and UX, it's still 2 sides of the brain. But yeah, I took that focus into those 2 areas really.
So you're saying that you had a couple options and you just like flipped a coin and said, I'm going to go this direction?
Yeah, it's kind of what jobs were coming up. I was like, well, web design. Yeah, I've done a bit of that at uni. I'll just go that direction. Yeah. I just flung myself.
Well, how lucky were you to choose that direction?
I think also there's not a lot of females in the digital design space. So I do think, this is like, we're talking like 15 plus years ago. It was very male dominated. So I think, when a female comes to interview, I think it kind of got me in the door a bit more because they want to diversify, don't they?
Yeah, good for you for doing that though. So walk me through the difference between like website design and UX, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm my niece is a designer. I'll just throw a logo to her and then I'll have her build my website and then I'll have her do UX and I'll have like all of those are different design skills, right? Walk us through what the difference is in all of those.
Yeah, it definitely is 2 hats. I'm wearing 2 hats using 2 sides of the brain because the UX side is more that logical thinking and that process driven, a bit more like research, looking at insights, looking at behavior, that sort of psychology side of things as well, understanding your users and doing a lot more planning. And actually there's a lot of UX designers out there who don't do any visual things. They just plan journeys and they maybe sitemap and wireframe, but they don't have the creative side of it. But I do that as well. So I will plan these journeys and these websites, and then I'll actually dive in and apply the brand and make it really creative. So yeah, it's 2 sides of the brain in that sense, that you're creating something that not only looks beautiful, but is really easy to use. So it's a win-win, right?
Yeah, I think you guys are a powerhouse team. I think that having the skills that you have, Lauren, with your, digital marketing background and leaning more towards SEO and content, that makes you super strong in the SEO world. And Lucy having, the coding and development background, as well as design and UX, I think there's probably not a stronger team that I can think of to do something as good as what you guys are doing, right? So you guys now work, there you go. You guys now work for a company called Abstract. Tell me about what does your day-to-day look like? How do you guys work together? What does that process look like?
Well, we face each other all day.
Okay.
So that's great. Constant conversations. I suppose we start most of our projects together in terms of if we get a website project in and it has that planning stage, then we'll instantly start working together. And that could be that we both take a different route, but we're essentially doing the same thing. So I'll be looking at everything in terms of the data and the search queries, the user behavior that they're doing on site in terms of the analytics and the time on page and everything. And then me and Lucy start working together where I feed that information into her. I don't know if you want to add on to that, Lucy, before I get carried away.
Well, we always start with a discovery workshop as well, really. We'll sit down with the client and me and Lauren will just, fire questions at them and try and eke out what we both need to know. And I kind of go more into the realms of looking at personas. So trying to build up what those audience profiles are. So we've got a really clear idea of who it is we're designing for. And then, we both we kind of do the same tasks, but with a different tools. We always say, don't we? It's the same goal, different tools. So we'll go off and we'll both look at competitors, for example. But I might be looking at, what sort of content they've got on there, and how they're structuring things, what language are they using, but then Lauren we'll look at it from a different angle, and we'll kind of go off and do our separate things, but we'll be constantly coming back together with what we're learning, and then sort of collaborating at every point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my competitors might be different to Lucy's. So Lucy's might have the offline competitors, the really big brands that these brands see themselves pitting against each other. But I might be looking at the digital competitors, which in search would be completely different necessarily based on the sorts of the websites and pages that people have built. So it's really interesting when you start to have those differences, and then we come back together and say, well, I found this and I found this, and how do we kind of battle out who wins over those things, and what's going to be most important to the user at the end of the day is what their site is structured like, or what it looks like in terms of on-page content. But I think one of the things that we do that is quite different is we both do a separate sitemap. So we'll both create our own sitemaps, and then we will come back and compare them together.
So mine will be more user focused in turn, and also like for the clients, really. Sometimes, if you give a client a heavy URL structure that Lauren's put together, they can't get their heads around it. So my sitemap is more the visual sitemap of what they might see in that menu at the top of the head of their website. So mine is more sort of user focused and thinking of brand language, I suppose, and how that all comes together. But then Lauren's sitemap's much more in depth.
I think one of the really interesting things and the important things with the SXO is that when we do these sitemaps, when Lucy's looking at them, she's looking at different websites in terms of the competitors and the language that they're using and the brand language. But the language I'm looking at is what a user is actively searching for in like Search Console and those types of queries. So it gets really interesting when you create in the navigational sitemap, which Lucy does, and me coming to her with these queries and saying, well, that's what the competitors are using on their site, but this is actually what people are searching for. So maybe this is the language we should be using because it resonates with them a lot more. So it's those really interesting contextual how we display things to users when the data's saying one thing and maybe a competitor's saying another.
It's super interesting to see how this process works and bringing it together. And I love that you both do your own things and then you come together. There's so much to unpack in that I want to talk about in the tactical section about that. But let me ask you a question before we jump into tactical. Was there for both of you, or maybe one of you, sort of this aha moment, like a light bulb switch where it's like using UX affects SEO? Like, was there a moment you looked at the data and you're like, oh my gosh, this page has amazing UX and it's ranking really well? I wonder if there's a correlation.
I think it originally started for us personally is that Lucy was mentoring me. So she was mentoring me on UX, and I wanted to gain a better understanding of what she did as a job so I could kind of bring that into the copywriting and the SEO I did. But when we started working together, we found that our understanding of each other's kind of the tactical things that we did or the principles that we used were really similar. And we did that on one website and launched it, and the results were amazing. We're like, well, what have we just done? Like, how did we do that? What is this thing we found? And I think it wasn't until, so Lucy started mentoring me in the January. It wasn't until the October that I found an article. I think it's by Sarah Fernandez.
Okay.
She's quite big in SEO, and it was talking about SXO, and I was like, oh, this is exactly what we're doing. So that was when there was like, oh, okay, it's working. It's creating these amazing results, and this is what it is. This explains it really well.
I've always told my clients from the beginning that really 15 plus years ago, I've always said, if you just have a good user experience on the website, you'll cover the majority of SEO tactics. Like people are like, teach me about SEO. And it's like this whole list of a million things you can do. And when you really like narrow it down, and I believe it was confirmed in the data leak from Google's algorithm, when that got leaked out, they basically said user experience has a lot to do with how they rank, right? How long people are on page, what they do when they're on page, like the flow that they go through on your website. So I think it's awesome that you guys picked this up. How many years ago was it? Was it in 2015 when you're like, hey, we should start doing this together, or was it a little bit later than that?
No, it was much later. So it was last January, so January 2023, that we started working together like this, I think. And since then, it's just kind of flourished.
That's so cool. So Lucy, I think a lot of people, especially like just small business owners, and maybe up and coming digital marketers, they probably don't lean as heavy towards the UX as they probably should. Help me understand from a UX standpoint, why is it important for these marketers, these SEO people, to like really go through the analysis that you do with competitors and looking at the flows and looking at the language and doing all the UX that you do? Why is that so important, and much more important now than it ever has been in the past?
I think it just goes so hand in hand, though, doesn't it? As well, there's such a lot of crossover with the SEO and the UX, and like you say, Google and search engines, they are using their algorithms, they are judging you on your user experience. So that's why it is so important. But it's just even things like down to, having good mobile optimization from a UX perspective. Our users are going to have a better experience when they're browsing on their mobile phone, or if we've got a really fast loading site, then search engines love that because we've got good performance, but also our users love that because they can get to what they need to get to quicker. So it's just so hand in hand, like we're both achieving the same goal essentially. But so that I think it's just such a great crossover. And so it's interesting you said that you feel like sometimes agencies are more focused on the SEO than the UX, but I feel like or maybe it's the UK, but I don't know. But I think we notice more the opposite, don't we, Lauren? It's more like we can sell UX and design much easier than selling in the SEO side of it sometimes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's such a big miseducation around SEO, especially in the UK, as all these kind of black hat tactics and just doing SEO to make money and all of these sorts of things. But I think there's a lot of agencies now and a lot of SEO experts that really understand not necessarily the tactical principles that you need to rank in search and everything, but more that user experience side of things, and really taking a people-centric approach to SEO and getting the content that people want to see in front of them rather than scattering as much as you can over a results page. So I think it's really important as well that with Google's algorithm updates, they've got this EAT and now they've added an extra E onto it. So that's your experience side of it. And that just proves how important UX is to search, because that is what Google is looking for, and other search engines as well. Obviously, they don't have the market share, but it's so important that the user experience is on point when an organic user arrives there, so they don't just click off and then search for something else. So it's kind of that really holistic approach to everything.
I think you might be right. Maybe it's different in the UK than it is in the United States, because in the United States, at least my impression, and I could be wrong, but my impression is that SEOs focus more on like, what does the search engine want instead of what does the user want, right? So if I have like, is the code working well? Is the schema there? Schema is important. I understand that, but you don't see that on the front end, right? It's not a user experience thing. So it's important to have. And I'm not saying that these things that are on the back end aren't important, but a lot of SEOs, and I feel like it's sort of a trap that new SEOs are getting into, is when you have a client and somebody reaches out to you and say, hey, do an analysis for me. All of these, I've had lots of clients come to me and say, I have this other agency and this is the analysis they give me. And it's really just spit out of, you have this many broken links, this many errors, this many blah, 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 right? And nothing that says, oh, by the way, the button on the home page, your main call to action, doesn't work, right? Like, Like,
Yeah.
so the user experience should be more important. And I'm hoping that maybe through this podcast series, people will start to see, especially here in the United States, there's more to SEO than just like whatever SEMrush can spit out for you, right? There's more to it, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you
Yeah,
put the user
absolutely.
experience, I mean, if your UX is good, you're ultimately you're going to make your search engines happy, aren't you? Because you're going to get people spending longer on your site, browsing around, being more engaged. You're going to retain them for longer if
Yeah.
you're giving them the right content, if you're helping them with their journeys, or you're kind of preempting what their pain points might be and what they're looking for, like to ultimately to get them through to that conversion. But if you're doing all that right, then you're going to lower your bounce rates, you're going to
Yeah.
higher your dwell times, and all of that then feeds back into the SEO rankings, doesn't it? So
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think a lot of it could just be habit too. I think a lot of people, when they get in the SEO world, they're taught, go look for broken links, go look at the title and metas, go look at these basic things. And sometimes I think, Lucy, you said it before, it's sort of right brain, left brain. And maybe you were talking about coding versus design, but I think the same thing is design for SEO, because sometimes it's hard for an SEO to look at the website and think about experience without thinking of all of these other like SEO tactics that need to be implemented. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's go right into the tactical side of things. This is my favorite part of the podcast. This is where I think the majority of the value for the listeners come from. Although a lot of people do love listening to the stories that humanizes people and makes them feel like, oh, if that person can do it, I can do it. The tactical side of things is where the business owners come to learn. It's where the up and coming, the digital marketers are saying, I need a different perspective. I need to learn something different. I feel like I've capped in my in-house work, and I need to think of a different angle to take. And so they come to this section, they learn from experts like you guys, and then they take it back and they implement that stuff, which is, in my opinion, really, really fun and exciting. So if we jump into the tactical side of things, what is SXO?
So SXO is SEO and UX combined. So it creates that force, and it's really about creating a really user-centric approach to building a website. And that means building it from the very initial planning stages and really thinking about the structure of a site and how that's laid out and your content zones, and thinking about not only how the user navigates around it, but thinking about how a search engine crawls that site as well. And SXO really kind of maximizes the visibility within search, but it also means that anyone coming from search, their search intent and user intent has been matched by the experience that they land on the website. So the ultimate goal of SXO is to be visible in search and reduce the amount of clicks on a website. So one click in, read your content, and maybe that is one final click, which might be the call to action, or it might be going on to further that journey of discovery and more content. But the ultimate goal is to get a user exactly where they want to be.
Lucy, what would you say are the top 3 to 5 UX principles that can directly, positively impact SEO?
Well, like I said earlier, it's a big crossover, but I think things like having a really clear and intuitive navigation. If your menu is really easy to understand and it's really logical for the reader, then it's going to be easy for that user to get through the site. But then also it's going to have a great SEO impact, because that improves things like crawlability and indexing. You've got things like internal linking as well. Like that's a really, really strong UX principle in terms of thinking about customer journey mapping and trying to predict what is the probable next step that the user might want to take. So actually presenting them with relevant, related content to keep them moving through the site. So again, great for the user to get through and understand and discover and be even more like kind of champion to convert. But SEO impact is great there, because internal linking is all about that sort of distributing the page authority and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover. Call to actions, I'd say, is another one. So having really well designed call to actions, it's going to help the user take the next step, understand where to get to. It's going to engage them, but then that's going to increase those engagement rates, which Google and so on will enjoy, will reward us with those higher rankings, if you like.
Let me double click down on some of those. So you said website navigation, internal linking, and calls to action. So if we double click down into those and say, so if I'm a business owner and maybe I'm a dentist, right? And I don't have a marketing team and I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, that's cool. I need to fix my navigation. How? What does that mean? Like, how can I as a business owner look at that and make it better?
I think really you've just got to really understand your audience type. Quite often, the best thing you can do is kind of reduce the amount in that menu and reduce the amount of pages. That's something we see a lot when clients come to us, is they've got these websites that have grown over time, and there's so many links up there in the menu and there's so many drop downs, and that can be decision overload for a reader. I think what's the optimum number of choices? It's like 5 to 7 or something. Okay. So don't give people too many options. Don't give them too many pages. Don't make them think. There's a fantastic book out there called Don't Make Me Think. So that's a good book to go and read. But so I think about how to declutter in terms of that menu. I think about how to group things differently, because sometimes you find, again, people just keep growing their website and then all of a sudden you've got this, I don't know, a page about maintenance that's sitting somewhere over underneath insights or something. Like, you get these random placement of pages that don't make sense. So think about the groupings of those menu items as well.
Yeah, and also considering the mobile experience. If you have 50 different things in the navigation, your mobile experience becomes almost impossible to navigate, right?
Oh God, yeah. Keep it to a minimum. And also, don't think I need to put every page in this menu. Get people to like those overview pages where you can kind of give them the top level detail, because every reader on your site is different. Some people want to just jump to there and skip and jump again. And then there's the people that actually want to slow down. They want to digest it all. So it's like helping those two different types of audiences navigate your site.
Lauren, I'm going to have you double click down into the second topic that she talked about, which is internal linking. It's a big part of SEO. What is your strategy when you get a new client on to internal link effectively?
So when we get a new client, one of the first things I do with internal linking especially is make them call all of their content. So that would be looking across, say, all their articles and looking in Search Console and really understanding what content people consume and how long they spend reading it, to get that idea of what you actually need to interlink across the site. And it will be following the same kind of principles that Lucy does as well in terms of UX, of thinking, well, they're on this page, they clicked here because that is their intent. They want to learn about a podcast. And then they might click into an article about a podcast and then of something more about creating a podcast. And it's creating that journey intellectually and intuitively, as thinking, well, what other information do they need and where do they want to end in this journey, and just making sure that anything on that first initial page that they land on, everything coming out of it has the same search intent and everything coming back into it has the same search intent as well, which really you start to see rankings boost, because when Google and other search engines come in to crawl a site, they really understand what this page is about and everything stemming off of it in order to rank you for podcast in Google. So it's really just thinking about what a user wants when they arrive on that site and ensuring that anything links out to that same intent.
How important is it to have an anchor text versus a www.website.com versus click here or see more type of a link in your internal linking?
Yeah, so I don't think it matters too much whether it's www or an anchor text. What I think is most important is that language, whether it's click here or read me or whatever that is, it needs to follow the same search intent. So if you're just putting click here or read more, it doesn't mean anything to anyone really. But if you're saying read more about this podcast or read more about this, and actually saying what it is for, that's more intuitive, and it also has more keywords in it, so it's beneficial to SEO. It's telling Google exactly where that link is going to as well through that text. So I wouldn't get so hung up on anchor text or the actual domain that you might be putting in there or the page, but more so what the language is that you're using on that text.
Okay.
I will absolutely double down on that. I've got a massive bugbear when I see find out more or like learn or even like those from a user experience perspective, they're just not scannable. You know, if people just, because quite often people just scan a web page, so they'll read the heading and then they'll read the button. So I don't know. I even when I'm just designing with placeholder text, I will try and always to avoid find out more because I don't want to encourage our clients and to actually write links like that because I just don't think it's very helpful.
Which is a perfect segue to the third thing you mentioned, which is calls to action. So Lucy, tell me like how, when, where, why do you do calls to actions? I've seen different examples of like funnels where it's like a paragraph and a call to action and a video and a call to action and like multiple calls to actions on the page versus a call to action at the top, read the whole entire blog, call to action at the bottom. Talk me through what is the best in your experience, the best type of call to action. Is it a big button? Is it a link? Is it everywhere on the page? Like, help me understand that full holistic view.
Cool. I mean, I might start by saying what's bad practice,
Okay,
which
perfect.
might lead us into best practice. Because I do audit a lot of websites and I might land on a homepage of a client's website to audit it. And I can count sometimes 7 to 10 buttons that say inquire now. It's the same button. And no reader wants that. It's just punching the same word at you constantly. It's like, hang on a minute, I've just landed here.
Yeah.
Let me at least like understand who you are. At least like going, I'm going to take you out for dinner before we go on like any further, it's a bit like dating, I always say, in terms of, you've got to like just let people understand who you are, what you do, what you offer. Then they might be ready to click that call to action. So it's about timely locations of that call to action and relevant positions in the journey. That might be quite often at the bottom of the page, but not always. Sometimes you might place it sort of in the second third of the page, and then there might be further. Because I always think if that person's still not ready to act, then I need to give them a bit more. Maybe they need a bit of reassurance. Maybe they need to see a bit more about the team, or then they need an FAQ, like trying to think, they need a little bit more fostering and nurturing before they're going to act. So I think that timely positioning or I think visually, it's definitely got to look prominent. It's got to stand out from the rest of the site. That doesn't mean it needs flashing lights on it, which we did have that suggestion from a client recently. But no, it just needs to, visually stand apart in terms of color, sizing, imagery that's engaging and going to draw the eye. Location is important, and also like the visual aesthetic of the call to actions and the language. We often talk to our clients around being really personable. So don't just have the same CTA block at the bottom of every page. Like the reader's going to be like, I've seen that before, and they're just going to ignore it. So actually changing your language and the button language to be relevant to that particular page and talk directly to your audience, that's going to be more successful.
Lauren, walk me through what type of data you look at to see if what you're doing as an SEO combined with the UX is successful or not.
So, I mean, we'll look at a few different things. One of them will be Search Console. So if I've created a specific sort of SEO strategy alongside the SXO, we'll be looking for the keywords that we've introduced to make sure they're coming up into Search Console. We'll be looking at the pages in Search Console and the clicks they get in and the increases in click-through rate or impressions, because we're seeing that visibility grow. We'll be looking at GA4. So that could be dependent on the goals of our client and their KPIs as well. So if they have said, we need to get more people on this page and we need them to spend a lot of time here, we'll obviously want the engagement time to go up. But as SXO, we might want to bring the engagement time down because we want them to go on that page and complete their journey there, or we might want them to move around. So I'll be looking at the behavior flows as well and seeing that they're actually taking the journeys that we wanted them to take. So we might even look at things like Hotjar too. So put Hotjar on the site and understand, and this would be a good one for anyone looking at their navigation as well, to get Hotjar on that site and see where people click on their navigation, and if they understand where a button is, or if they understand that flow that we've created. So it's looking at all of these different areas to really see an overall view as what we've done. Is it actually working or isn't it?
Yeah. So you brought up a point here that you also mentioned in the beginning, and I want to dig into a little bit more. Where do you two feel like the conflict is the most, where it's like, this is more important in SEO, this is more important in UX? Where do you see that conflict happening the most, and then how do you resolve that?
I think the most challenging thing sometimes with that compromise for me comes down to language. And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, is, things like your headings and your navigation labels. From my perspective, I might be like maybe using softer and more emotive language depending on the audience, or I might be having to consider the brand's tone of voice in terms of what that language should be in the headers and things like that. But then from Lauren's side, she'll be going, oh, but for search, this keyword's really important. I need that to be in the heading. And so we kind of have this, or how do we compromise in terms of having thing that is very tonally on brand, that suits the audience that we're talking to, but still satisfies the search engine and the keyword needs. That's probably the big challenge I find that we come across. You've probably got some more, Lauren.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things, I think you touched on it a little bit, Eli, is that there's I think there's a lack of understanding around search in terms of you have to think about it in two different ways. So you've got two different audiences. So you've got your user and you've got search, as like the search engine is your user, and you've got the people that are actually on there. So the way I try to pitch it is that search is the tool that I'm using to get you visible and to be clicked, whereas I'm trying to approach the user and looking at the sort of language they actually use in Search Console rather than in, say, SEMrush or SE ranking or anything like that. So when I'm doing these site maps, I'm actually looking at queries people are actively searching for, and the thing that this user is typing into search. So I know that is the language that they're using, rather than me going into SE ranking or SEMrush and saying, oh, this has a really high search volume, we should use it. What I'm looking at is what they're actively typing. So I have more of an understanding of the audience from that perspective and how they think in that moment when they go into search. So that's where our battles start to happen. And I'm going to Lucy and saying, well, I need it for the keywords, but this is what our user is actually searching for. So how do we encompass that in this navigation and this labeling to kind of suit them and relate to them, but also match the brand language and match the kind of tone of voice and everything of the site. So yeah, it does become a real battle, and it's the difference between on a page level when Lucy might be looking at the H1, for instance, and she wants to put in a really beautiful brand-led message. And I'm like, well, that actually is really important to search for this specific page. So that comes down to a strategy level of me saying, all of these pages need to be really SEO led and really SEO heavy, but all of these pages, do what you want with. You can put whatever brand led message you want on there. So it's thinking on a tactical, it's thinking on a tactical level of what is the most important pages for search and how do we compromise on those. And it might be me saying to Lucy, I really need you to put bullet points in this page because that would be really good for schema and JSON LD. Where she might be like, well, that's no good for this content. So it's really bit by bit, as for each different, every website's different and every audience is different. So we have to go down on a granular level every single time.
And that's where the SXO becomes so powerful though, doesn't it? Because if I was off designing and planning this website in isolation and, I wouldn't know we need the schema there. Like a lot of UX designers or digital designers don't really understand and know what that is. And so actually having those conversations, Lauren can say, I need an FAQ section on this page. It's really important. For what I'm doing. And I can fold that in. Whereas before I might not have thought, this page needs like the FAQs like for the user, but it might need it for search. So that's where it becomes really powerful, I think.
And like with things with the FAQs, it's not just thinking about them in terms of what that design is going to look like when we first build it and it goes live. It's thinking, well, we might need this component in the future. So if a client wants to go onto an SEO retainer and say 6 months time because they need more support, it's having that in our arsenal that's already been built and already available on the site for me to go in and then say, well, let's put an FAQ on this page, and it's already there. We can do it instantly, and it's not, we need to get development involved or we need to get more budget. It's readily available to us already.
So after you guys get in a room and you arm wrestle it out and you're like, okay, here's where we compromise, here's where we make it work. Do you ever then take that to the client and the client's like, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that? And if so, where do you go from there?
Yeah, we've had that loads.
Yeah, as long as we can justify and back up our decisions from a UX and from an SEO perspective, so it makes our decision making so strong and difficult to like disagree with, doesn't it? Especially when there's data. Lauren loves getting her data in.
Yeah, I always say you can't argue with data. So if I go to them and say this, you can't say no because it's facts and it's what we're seeing actively on the site and it's in the analytics. So the only reason you can argue against it is if it's against your brand and what your brand's kind of mission is and everything. So I think we spend so much time in these initial planning stages really looking into the data and the competitors, and in the workshops really understanding the brand and what they're trying to do, that when we do go into these meetings, there's kind of like, they can't stop us almost because we're like, well, it's this and it's this and it's this. But I think it's so important, especially with what we do around SXO, that we educate as we go along. So when we're sitting down with clients, we'll kind of explain to them the process and everything that we've done to get to where we are. And I think that's so much better. It's not hand-holding, it's giving them the knowledge as well to kind of really understand their site and understand their audience and make these stronger decisions for, in the end, a better, hardworking website.
Mm-hmm. So, Lucy, you mentioned in the beginning the importance of journey mapping. Can you walk us through that process that you go through in the beginning of your strategy? What is a journey map? How do you work your way through that?
I'd say like a customer journey mapping really is about, it's like stepping through every point in a customer's journey. And that could be from the point before they even land on your website. So what are those touch points? Where have they been initially? Have they come through a search engine? Have they come through an ad, a paid ad? Have they come through social? So thinking about where they're coming into the site and with what prior knowledge they might have. And just stepping through every touch point then of where they go, what decision making they are going through, how are they thinking and feeling about everything that they're coming across, what are their pain points at different areas of the site. And we can weave insight and analytics into that as well, like in terms of seeing where people are dropping off. So we can then go, right, why are they dropping off? What is the pain point that's hitting them there? And then you can, from that, you can learn the opportunities, like how do we avoid that? What can we actively do? Do they need more information about this? Do they need reassurance here? Or do they need a trust point? So really mapping out every step in their journey until they reach that end conversion. That is, in a nutshell, I guess, what customer journey mapping is. But it's, I guess, the difference with us now is that we're weaving that initial search intent into it, especially for me anyway. I think earlier you said, what was that like aha moment where you realized we were onto something good? For me, previously in agencies, I haven't got, to work closely with an SEO person. So when, I'd go off and do my analytics and then Lauren would come in with her search console and show me about search intent and what keywords they're actually searching for. I was like, oh my God, this is like gold dust. This is like another layer of insight that I can add to my reasoning and this journey map that I'm creating.
And Lauren, do you create your own journey map from an SEO standpoint, or do you take that Lucy does and then sort of say, here's where I'm gonna throw in SEO and here's where it's not important? Like, what's your process look like from that?
I think when Lucy's creating that journey map and really thinking about the navigation and all the pages that come down off of that, because I've worked so closely with her on those stages, it's kind of already imprinted in my brain as what's happening on the site. So for me, it's more thinking about, well, what's the interlinking across those and what content do we need to kind of have in and out of all of them? So it's less journey map and it's more in a strategy stage of thinking, what you like to say, what content needs to come into that page and what content needs to go out. So I wouldn't say I have a process in terms of sitting drawing it out or having any kind of slow map or anything like that, but it's just considering it based on the navigational sitemap that Lucy's created.
Okay. What are the common 2 to 3 friction points that you guys always have, and maybe you've learned through this, the process of working together, but what are common, from an SEO standpoint, every single time you work with a UX designer, you're like, here are 3 things that I want, and that UX designer is like, you cannot have those. What are those common conflict points that maybe not you guys, but other people working together could come across?
So breadcrumbs are always a point of friction and conflict. But we've kind of gotten around that a little bit now. So with big e-commerces and things, you want a breadcrumb on there because it's good for search, they can read it, and also it's good for the user to kind of go back through those steps. But we use JSON LD a lot more now, so that puts the breadcrumb on site, that it's not as visible to the user, but it's there. So I'm happy and Lucy's happy because she doesn't have to weave this into her beautiful design anymore. And I think another really big one is we had a case of this really recently. We was doing a website for a user that is e-commerce, but without the cart or buying journey on it. And it's for multiple different types of upholstery, furniture with all different sizes. And I've kind of done the SEO strategy and seen that 2-seater sofa, 3-seater sofa is really important. It's a really good keyword for me. So the way that Lucy had designed it originally was going to be using JavaScript from a dev standpoint, but that's not going to read the SEO the way I wanted to read it. So it was having that initial conversation where if we'd never had that from an SEO and a UX, that would have gone through design to development and those keywords would have never been hit. But because we're having these conversations and we're looping in our developers as well, they can say to us, well, we wouldn't build it like that. So that then comes back to us and it comes back to Lucy to say, you need to rethink this whole component. So it's those moments where I think the SEO really works because we have these conversations and we're both in the room together and I'm actively going to Lucy's desk as well and saying, oh, what have you designed today? So it's those friction points of kind of understanding the way search engines read pages as well. So when it gets to the UX stage, UX designers have a better understanding of how their components are laid out and how you hit those keywords without hiding them in the development either.
What about from your side, Lucy?
Yeah, what are those things like the SEO practices that might negatively affect my user experience? I guess it would be things like, obviously Lauren doesn't do this because she's a great SEO expert, but you see it from other agencies like that keyword stuffing. That is not natural for a reader to read these paragraphs that are just quite obviously stuffed with keywords and they don't read very naturally. So I think that's perhaps one of those things, or excessive internal linking. So you might read a paragraph and there's 2 or 3 links within it, and that is disrupting my reading experience as well as a user. So and too much content. I don't know if it's still the same now, but it used to be that lots of long form content was really good for search. But then I think Google changed its mind and now it's somewhere in between perhaps. But finding those balances where, if we do need a lot of content for search reasons, then from my perspective, can I use bullet points? Can I bring call out messages? How can I chunk that content up so it's easier to digest,
Are there any other considerations that you guys would offer up to business owners or up-and-coming marketers around SXO?
I think it's very much back to basics, like looking at the site. I think one of the things you touched upon with SEO is that there's so many SEOs learning right now that are coming through as beginners and they're being taught the kind of technical side of SEO, and they're relying heavily on tools like SEMrush and Mars and SEO ranking to kind of spit out these reports for them that tells you you've got 23 meta descriptions that are all the same. Like, these are really basic things that you can go in and fix, but it's getting such a better understanding of your users and, like I say, what their intent is and why they want to land on a certain sort of page. Is it for information? Is it because they're ready to buy? Is it because they're just going on this discovery journey of your brand and finding this information? And it's really understanding this audience and what they're trying to do from the point they are at search to the point they are on your site. So I would say that spend a lot more time understanding users and personas and user experience and that kind of whole customer journey, and focus less on the tactics. I mean, they are very important, don't get me wrong. It's really important to do technical SEO and on-page SEO, but you need to have such a good understanding of your audience in order to get everything else right as well.
From your side, Lucy, anything else?
I guess I think if a business owner is thinking about, you know, how the importance of SEO and UX, and maybe they are engaging an SEO agency and a design agency, like I would say, look for agencies who are merging this together, because there's such a difference when your SEO agency is completely separate from your design agency, because you don't have that crossover and you don't talk, and those really valuable conversations don't happen. So I'd say if you are approaching an agency, try and see if there's one like Abstract that does combine the SEO and the UX together in-house in one space, because I think it's so valuable.
Where do you guys see the future going in SEO and UX?
It's all going to go to SXO. Everyone's going to be doing it. It's going to be great.
It's going to have to be, isn't it?
Yeah, I think because Google is so dominant in search, and we know that the algorithm updates they're doing and helpful content update and EEAT and all of these different things is so focused on user experience now. You kind of have to get into that angle as SXO and really understand how they work hard together. Otherwise, you're going to be doing all of these SEO tactics on a site that isn't optimized with UX and isn't optimized with the customer journey or the navigation or anything. So you're always going to be kind of down at the bottom of the pile eventually, where another algorithm update comes in and trashes your site because you don't have the fundamentals of the UX or the site speed or the design or anything there. So you can do as much SEO as you want, but if your website isn't strong enough, then it's not going to work in the end, I don't think.
Yeah. And I would say you've got to consider now that users have such different expectations, don't they? Like, they do just expect fast, intuitive, engaging online experiences. We have such a short attention spans now, you know, like at TikTok, it's dwindling our attention spans. And we don't want a slow website that's hard to navigate, that isn't got valuable content. So we have to be merging that SEO and that UX so that, these websites aren't just discoverable, but they're also really engaging for our visitors. And I think if you can apply that SXO thinking, then it's going to give businesses that competitive advantage as well, isn't it?
Well, ladies, I've really appreciated the conversation today. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to jump on and talk to me and the audience about SXO, SEO and user experience. I've learned a lot. There's a lot of things I'm taking mental notes of that I'm going to go to my website and update. So I appreciate you taking the time today and joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thanks.
No, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone listening out there, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the episode today. Listen, I know how valuable an hour of your time can be, and for you to take that busy time out of your day and spend it with us, it really means a lot. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the interview. Ask us questions. Let us know what other digital topics you'd like to hear about in the future. We're here to add value to your life and elevate your digital presence online. If you'd like some help doing that, reach out to me at fireusmarketing.com. See you on the next one.